are now watching The Beach.
It's hard to believe the Nintendo Switch is over half a decade old. I remember waiting at a Walmart to get it day one, and a few months later, bringing it on my first trip to Greece with my library of a whopping 4 games. Overall, I was very excited for the future of Nintendo, and nowhere was this more apparent than with Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is hands down the most hyped I've ever been for a game. Even when we only got 5 seconds of footage in the Switch reveal trailer in 2016, I knew we were in for something truly incredible. And the official reveal? Let me tell you, it was mind-blowing. Super Mario Odyssey seemed monumental for the Mario series. Not only did it bring creativity back after years of generic Mario games, but it was also the return of Sandbox 3D Mario, and when the game released, the hype was all worth it. Super Mario Odyssey is a game that's very special to me. From the hype leading up to it, to the 12-hour session playing the game on launch day, and the over 300 hours I put into it, I think it's fair to say I found Super Mario Odyssey to be more than just your average game. But it's been half a decade since then. Things can change, so in honor of Super Mario Odyssey's 5th anniversary, I wanted to revisit it and see if it was just as great as I remembered it. Put your hats on and get your Super Mario cereal as we revisit Super Mario Odyssey 5 years later. Our story begins the way Mario games usually end. Mario and Bowser duke it out on his fancy airship in the skies above the Mushroom Kingdom. Why Bowser has such a fancy airship isn't because he suddenly made good decisions and invested in gold during the events of New Super Mario Bros. 2, but because he plans on marrying Peach. Mario actually ends up losing the battle and ends up in a mysterious new kingdom, and he loses his hat as well. If the suit isn't enough to show that Bowser means business, then the disrespect to Mario's hat will. Luckily, Mario meets a new character, Cappy, who is also on a quest to stop Bowser because he captured his sister Tiara, and thus, Mario and Cappy set out on a journey to stop Bowser's wedding and rescue Peach and Tiara. Already before the game even begins, Super Mario Odyssey has an edge. With most Mario games, it's never explained why Bowser captures Peach. It could be because he has devious ideas, or he just needs someone to play Mario Party 10 with. Yet again, that would be a pretty devious idea, but it's clear as day here that in Super Mario Odyssey, his goal is to marry Princess Peach. Honestly, if his goal is marriage, he should probably go on OK Koopa and find a girl that actually wants him, or better yet, do the unthinkable and actually talk to them. I'm sure there's a Koopa just like Bowser out there, and Bowser will probably find that out eventually. But come on, it's a Mario game, not a dating sim. If you want that, you'd have to talk to Francis. While the story isn't anything groundbreaking, I appreciate the effort to do something out of the ordinary even if it's not taken as far as I would have liked. But considering this is a 3D Mario game, a good story is nice to have, but the gameplay is the most important factor. Starting with Super Mario Galaxy, the 3D Mario games took a more linear approach. The Galaxy games were structured to be linear, but they still had strong elements of open world 3D Mario with the hidden stars. Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World, on the other hand, are totally linear level design-wise. When it comes to what I prefer, it's hard to say. I love open world 3D Mario, but I also love linear 3D Mario. But if there's one thing I wasn't fond of, it was simplifying Mario's movement in the linear games. There wasn't much to do outside of the standard running and jumping, not even the triple jump in 3D World, and this was a common criticism of that game. And when it came to Odyssey, that feedback was taken into account, because Mario's moveset is larger and more versatile than it's ever been before. Mario can of course run and jump. Moves such as the long jump and wall jump are also retained. But classic moves such as the triple jump and dive also make a comeback. Mario can even somersault for a speed boost. Mario's control is better than it's ever been before and is near perfection. There's no jank present, everything controls how you would expect it to, and the physics are an absolute dream. This is hands down the best Mario has ever felt to control, and I haven't even accounted for the expanded moveset with Cappy. Cappy can act as a platform and allow Mario to have some extra jumping distance, and acts as great insurance if you misjudge a jump. He can even grab coins. His extended moveset allows for Mario to have an incredibly versatile moveset, which not only gives more options, but makes the game even more fun. One of the best aspects of Super Mario Odyssey is controlling Mario, but what if I were to tell you that not only do you take control of Mario, but also take control of Mario taking control over enemies. Rather than power-ups, Super Mario Odyssey has captures. Cappy can use his ghostly abilities to allow Mario to take control over enemies and obstacles. You'll feel firsthand how worthless it is being a Goomba, or even earning a newfound respect for the Hammer Brothers after realizing they can only throw hammers or pans in an arc. Reminds me of the classic video Bowser's Minions. There are so many captures in the game, with some of my favorites being the Hammer Brothers, Glide on the Flying Lizard, and of course the T-Rex. And I'm not sure if it was intentional, but the Gushin enemies in the Seaside Kingdom really give me Super Mario Sunshine vibes. There are captures that are definitely favorites, but honestly, it's hard to find one I didn't have fun with. When you have a game with many sections that play differently, developers have to keep in mind to make sure the mechanics are well thought out, and in Super Mario Odyssey, the many sections with a capture ability in mind are designed excellently. In Steam Gardens, you take control of the Uproot enemies. There are many beans throughout the kingdom that you break by extending with the Uproot's legs, and in Mount Volbono, you traverse through the islands through lava as a lava bubble. Already, we have a very unique Mario game, and nowhere is this more apparent than with the kingdoms, and so far, we have a Mario game where you take control of a T-Rex. That alone shows you how creative this game is. The theme of Super Mario Odyssey is traveling around the world, but unlike Mario 3 Around the World, this is actually a good game. Many of the kingdoms are based on real-world locations. Instead of going for the standard Egyptian theme, the Sand Kingdom Tostarena is based on Mexico, complete with a colorful town and Sugar Skull residents. New Donk City is an entire metropolis for Mario to explore, and although the realistic humans are pretty out there, it's oddly fitting for a Mario game. But perhaps the coolest theme for a kingdom is the colorful Luncheon Kingdom, complete with blocky food and tubby custard for lava. The theming is excellent, but the design of the kingdoms is still the most important factor, and for the most part, the design is excellent. They're quite large in scope with many areas to explore. I honestly liked all the main kingdoms in the game, but if I had to choose one I wasn't too crazy about, it would be Lake Lamode. It's a bit cramped, and although the theming of Atlantis is cool, seeing an actual kingdom based on Greece in a Mario game is something I've wanted for years, and thankfully we got that with Beacon Beach and Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, based on Santorini. I'm aware Atlantis is based on Greek mythology, but a kingdom based on the country is what I wanted. But even so, I think the portrayal of Atlantis here is far better than another one I've seen. If there were two other kingdoms I wasn't too crazy about, it would be the side kingdoms that served as boss arenas. It's disappointing they weren't full-on kingdoms, especially the second one, but overall, the kingdoms are designed very well and have excellent theming. To travel to the kingdoms, you select which one you want to go to in the Odyssey. I thought the lack of a hub world would be something I might miss, but it wasn't a problem for me. Unlike linear 3D Mario games, the focus isn't so much about the platforming as it is the exploration to find the Power Moons. Power Moons are Odyssey's equivalent to Power Stars or Shine Sprites. The concept is the same. All of them are the objective needed to progress, but Power Moons function a bit differently. They are tied to missions, but obtaining one doesn't end a level. You are free to explore the kingdom as much as you want. Another key difference with the Power Moons is that there are far more of them than there are Power Stars or Shine Sprites in prior games, but to compensate for the sheer amount of them, the objectives to obtain them are simpler and not as in-depth. Many of them can be right out in the open or only require a simple ground pound, and at face value, this seems like it could be an issue. In fact, the abundance of moons is one of the most discussed aspects about the game. Too many moons, if you will. Alright guys, video is over! Super Mario Odyssey gets a 7.8 out of 10. Too much moons. All jokes aside, are there too many moons? And if so, is too much of a good thing not a good thing at all? Or is it too much of a good thing is wonderful? The game has nearly 1,000 Power Moons to collect. That number right there can seem a bit overwhelming, but as I stated before, the objectives to obtain moons are often as simple as breaking cheese blocks with a chef brother or lighting torches. In a game like Super Mario 64, which only has 7 objectives per world, now that would be alarming, but the moons are completely structured around the sandbox level design. The satisfaction of collecting Power Moons isn't solely based on an objective. In a game like Super Mario 64, you can obtain Power Stars out of order, but the solution is usually straightforward. But in Odyssey, there are many different ways you can go about collecting moons. Let's say there's one in the distance in Tostarena. Mario can capture a bullet bill or use Glide-On, and if you're really skilled, you could try to make a tricky jump off the moving platforms above the Moais. The satisfaction of Odyssey isn't so much about the moon itself, but how it rewards exploration. The fun is discovering every nook and cranny of a kingdom and being rewarded with either a moon or purple coins for doing so. And the game was specifically designed to be suitable to play in short bursts on the go, or if you want to marathon it on the TV. But not all the moons are based on simple objectives. There are many rooms throughout the kingdoms with platforming sections. These rooms will almost always have 2 moons to find, with one being at the end of a section, and others being hidden. Sometimes they'll even be centered around a specific capture ability. And there are also minigames where you can obtain power moons. There's a lot of variety, and even though the objectives can be the same throughout the kingdoms, the way you obtain the moons will be different. I understand how some might think the moons can get repetitive, but for me, it was never an issue. But if there's something I think most of us can agree on, it's with the bosses in the game. This game has some really cool bosses, but the issue is, they only take 3 hits to take out. Bosses being too easy has been a problem Mario has had for many years, and just because it's always been this way, that doesn't mean it should continue to be a thing. And unfortunately, that's an issue even Odyssey couldn't escape. And speaking of challenge, it would have been nice to have the game be more challenging. A lot of the challenge comes from collecting all the power moons, but having the option at least for a more difficult mode would have been nice. In addition to the power moons, there's a secondary collectible being the purple coins. There are about 50 to 100 of them per kingdom. Unlike the moons, you don't need them to complete the game, and you don't need an objective to get them. They're usually out in the open, you just need to keep your eyes peeled. But what's cool about them, and one of the coolest aspects about Odyssey, is the way coins are handled. For the first time in a mainline game outside of Super Mario Run, coins are used as currency. You can get Grand Hearts with them as well as Power Moons, but by far their coolest use is getting costumes for Mario to wear. Nowadays, it's common to see Mario outside the standard overalls and hat, but before Odyssey, it was an incredibly rare sight. And what's even cooler is many of the costumes reference obscure Mario games. Most of them you can get with standard coins, but the purple coins can get costumes specific to a kingdom's theme, as well as souvenirs for the Odyssey. All these are mostly cosmetic and don't really affect the gameplay outside of a few power moons that require costumes, but it's great being able to have Mario wear different costumes, and I like to often go with the theme of a kingdom, but costumes such as Wedding and Shirtless Mario are some of my favorites, though I'm not sure how I feel about Wedding Dress Mario. And hey, Green Mario is canon! I also love the descriptions for the costumes. Look how self-aware the Waluigi one is. The gameplay of Super Mario Odyssey is incredible, and considering how much fun things such as the costumes and theming are, the presentation is where the game can shine even further. Mario games are known to showcase the potential of the consoles that they're on. Games like Super Mario Sunshine as well as the Galaxy games, and even 3D Land, take full advantage of their hardware. The thing is, Super Mario Odyssey is not the first HD 3D Mario game. That would be Super Mario 3D World, which released 4 years prior, and 3D World has a stellar presentation, might I add. Considering the feat of HD was already done, Odyssey did something unique. It goes for a pseudo-realistic style for the characters, giving them far more detail. Mario, for example, has denim overalls, and his hair and mustache are realistic. Enemies such as Chain Chomps and Bullet Bills are scratched up and look more metallic, and this level of detail applies to every character in the game. But the realism primarily just applies to the textures. The characters themselves don't look off and resemble their iconic looks, just more detailed. This should be the modern standard for Mario character design. For some odd reason, Nintendo alternates between the realistic and plastic look for Mario in the Switch era, and I really wish they'd just stick to the Odyssey design, because I find it to be the best by far, and this level of detail applies to most of the game. But considering Odyssey has drastically different kingdoms, the art styles can vary. Forgotten Isle and Mount Valbono look completely different from the more realistic New Donk City and Toast Arena, and this can also apply to enemies such as having a realistic T-Rex in addition to things like Goombas. But if there's one thing that remains consistent, Super Mario Odyssey is a beautiful looking game. Even to this day, it's one of the most impressive looking Switch games, running at a smooth 60 frames per second, and as I stated before, costumes make the visual presentation all the more charming, and this game certainly doesn't have a lack of charm. You'll see things like making flowers bloom to get coins, as well as all kinds of cool references to other Mario games. Music, on the other hand, is a bit of an odd circumstance. In more remote areas, it's common to hear just ambience. The ambience is designed around the kingdom, sure. Cheveria's ambience is noticeably different than Steam Gardens, but even 5 years later, I'm not sure how I feel about it. It didn't bother me, but I feel having music would have been a better choice. But thankfully, there is a lot of music in the game, and as always, it's great. The standout, of course, being Jump Up Superstar, and this is the game that brought the best Mario girl, Pauline, back into the spotlight. The true one-up girl. The tracks do an excellent job capturing the tone of the locations that they're based on. New Donk City, for example, has a very jazzy theme to the music, while Tostarena has a completely different sound being Latin. The sound effects are also great. I feel with game retrospectives, sound effects aren't often brought up, but if you have sound effects that aren't fitting, it can hinder the experience. But I'm happy to say the sound effects in Super Mario Odyssey are great and very satisfying to hear. Now I will admit, the Galaxy games in 3D World have better soundtracks, but what's here is great and the overall presentation is stellar. And all this applies to handheld mode as well, though I always prefer to play on the TV. Super Mario Odyssey has some massive replay value. If you're going to just beat the game, it's going to be kinda short, only about 8 to 12 hours long. But beating the game is only the beginning, as there are hundreds of power moons to collect, as well as post-game content. I've beaten the game 100% at least twice, and have sunk in over 300 hours. Safe to say, Super Mario Odyssey has content to the power moon and back. What's often brought up is the amount of moons when it comes to content, but what's seldomly brought up is the extra content the game has. It got quite a few additional costumes throughout 2018, as well as the Luigi's Balloon World minigame. Now I will admit, the biggest disappointment of Super Mario Odyssey for me was not having Luigi playable, but it's good seeing him regardless. I'd rather have him playable, but you get what I mean. It's essentially a hide-and-seek mode with balloons where you can rack up a ton of coins. The concept of it is fun, but the reality is, a lot of the time, balloons will be in the same place. It's a nice addition regardless and definitely worth checking out. And speaking of Luigi, did you know Super Mario Odyssey has multiplayer without him? Yeah, he's not playable, but there is multiplayer, and there's a reason why you forgot about it, because it's pretty much just an extension of the co-star multiplayer from Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. It's definitely more fun since Cappy can do more things, but true co-op would have been nice, even if that meant split screen. But believe it or not, there's a mode Super Mario Odyssey has that you may have never realized was in the game. Nintendo originally started off as a toy manufacturer, and even to this day, you'll see elements of that. Nowhere is this more apparent recently than with Labo. In case you haven't heard of it, it was a weird experiment from Nintendo where you construct game peripherals out of cardboard. The idea is cool, but the reality of that ended up being that the building process is fun, but the games are incredibly shallow and are a one-and-done thing. You know you wouldn't play the games again, but it was insanely expensive at around $80 per set. But the final Labo set, being the VR one, was a bit of the exception. The starter kit was only $40 and it had support in quite a few other games, Super Mario Odyssey being one of them, making it the first 3D Mario game in VR. The second one in 3D. Thank you, Enclosed Granddad, for reminding me of that. So let's check it out. Initially getting into the VR mode, there was an issue. Because Nintendo needs to be Nintendo, there's no head strap for the Labo VR. They really didn't learn anything from the Virtual Boy, did they? You hold it up to your face like a pair of binoculars, and it's uncomfortable for an extended period of time. Thankfully, Dimitri does what Nintendo don't, and I gave the Labo VR headset a head strap from a $5 Walmart VR headset. Now, if I would have made this contraption now, I would have used the leg straps, but this was all the way back in 2019, so that's what I did. There are aftermarket headsets for the Switch now, but I made this before those were even a thing. So let's see if it was worth going to all the trouble for, and see what it's about. Unlike The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the entirety of Odyssey can't be played in VR. Instead, it's its own mode. Your goal is to find musical instruments to give to characters so they can perform in the New Donk City Festival. You'll also need 100 coins to get band members. The mode itself only consists of 3 kingdoms and it's very short. You'll be able to beat it within half an hour. Though to be fair, without the head strap, I couldn't imagine playing Labo VR comfortably for an extended period. Come to think of it, it's not even that enjoyable to begin with. You can't control the camera with the right analog stick and are forced to look around. Oftentimes it's easier to stand up and look, but you can't have anything around you or you might trip. Now I know that would be funny for you guys to watch, but if we want to celebrate Leg Strap Day next year, I gotta be careful. The best way to control the camera is by pressing the right analog stick so it automatically focuses on Mario, and once you get past the initial hoops, all you're left with is a mildly entertaining mode that ends sooner than you started it. But the thing that strikes me as the most odd, what kind of a VR experience is this? You would expect a first-person view, but it's essentially like Mario is a hamster in a cage you're watching over. At least it is in 3D though, so that's kinda cool. You can play it without the Labo VR, and I'd recommend checking it out just for the novelty, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to get a headset just to play it. The thing is, the Labo VR mode is truly bonus content, and Super Mario Odyssey has an ample amount of content no matter how you slice it, even before the updates. Now that's something you can't say about a lot of Switch games. In other words, if it didn't have a lot of content, I wouldn't get over 300 hours out of it. So far we've established Super Mario Odyssey has excellent gameplay and excellent presentation, and a ton of content. I do wish there was more music and that the game was more challenging, but other than that, everything has been dang near flawless. So what's the verdict? It's been half a decade. Many games have released, and occasionally my opinion of a game can change over time. At the time, Super Mario Odyssey was not only my favorite Mario game, but my favorite game of all time. This could have been amplified due to Odyssey being a complete revolution for the Mario series, successfully bringing it out of the generic era that the new Super Mario Bros. Series caused. I've had 5 years, nearly 2,000 days to think about it, and I can say, with uttermost certainty, that Super Mario Odyssey, after half a decade, is still my favorite Mario game of all time, and my personal favorite game of all time. Kirby and the Forgotten Land I feel is better from a design standpoint, most notably due to the bosses, but Super Mario Odyssey remains my favorite because of the excellent gameplay and the abundance of creativity. Not to mention, I also do prefer the Mario series. It has unique locations, excellent new mechanics, while also remaining true to what makes Mario games great to begin with. And until hopefully a sequel, there's no other game like Super Mario Odyssey.